Hello, everyone. I'd like to first start off by welcoming the audience and also provide a little bit of a land acknowledgement. So I am conducting this interview from Ottawa, where we are located on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. We acknowledge and respect our traditional hosts and thank them for allowing us to operate on this land. Given that we are conducting this interview virtually, I do ask that you take a moment as you're listening to this video to reflect on the land in which you are on. So with that being said, my name is Mahoney, and I'm a volunteer program committee member with the CSPC. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing and discussing with Gordon McCauley, who is the CEO and president of adMare. So Gordon was appointed president and CEO of adMare BioInnovations in 2016 after serving on the board for 4 years. He is an accomplished life sciences investor and executive. His bio is far too long to provide in full, so I've pulled out just a few highlights. So throughout his career, he's served in many executive and advisory positions in successful healthcare enterprises, such as president and CEO of Viable HealthWorks Corporation, a national healthcare service business. He was also the co-founder and partner of NDI Capital, an institutionally backed life sciences investment fund. And he's acted as senior advisor to several prominent Canadian political leaders, and he also sits on several boards. So Gordon currently serves as the chair of the board of directors for both Biotech Canada, Canada's national biotech industry organization, and also CGen, Canada's national genomics enterprise. He's also a director of Montreal In Vivo. Gordon earned his BA in political sciences from McMaster University, an an MBA with honors from IMD in Lausanne, Switzerland, and he holds the ICD designation from the Institute of Corporate Directors and the Rotman School of Business at the University of Toronto. So with that being said, I'd like to welcome Gordon to today's interview, and I really look forward to discussing the Canadian life sciences landscape and the ecosystem. So perhaps before we jump into our discussion, Gordon, is there anything you'd like to add from the offset?
Well, no, thank you for that kind introduction. You realize when you say it's too long, it just makes me sound old. But I do appreciate the opportunity because the CSPC is an extraordinary platform for all of us who care about the growth and development of science and in my self-interest, life sciences in Canada. So I'm delighted to be here and have this conversation. Thank you for doing it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gordon. So with that being said, we have several questions and I think a really great lofty discussion today. So the first question, obviously in the context of COVID, or rather to start with COVID, is that COVID has shone a global spotlight on the importance of life sciences. So how has the pandemic changed the Canadian life sciences landscape, both in terms of opportunities as well as challenges?
Well, I mean, look, like everywhere in the world, I think we've seen an extraordinary focus on the potential of life sciences. One of the things that people really have to keep reminding themselves of, and of course, everyone involved with CSPC knows this, that Canada has an extraordinary research enterprise. We punch well above our weight on any metric you want to choose for the output of our scientific enterprise. The challenge we've had historically is translating that into a sustainable life sciences industry. And one of the peculiar benefits of the pandemic, it feels inappropriate to call it a benefit, but you know what I mean, is that we have seen the extraordinary potential of Canadian science to respond and the business application of that response very quickly and in very condensed periods of time. So it's really shone, as you said in the question, shone a huge spotlight on the potential that exists within Canada, both from the perspective of basic research, but also from an industrial application of that research and building a life sciences industry. You know, that, as is implicit in the question, comes with certain challenges, and I think the biggest challenge is talent followed quickly by space. We've seen an extraordinary amount of capital come into the space in Canada and around the world, and that has really put a spotlight on the need for properly trained, commercially focused talent in this space, and the infrastructure of commercial wet lab space in which those folks can work. So a great opportunity for all of us, some specific challenges, but frankly, they're challenges my dad would have called sweet headaches. They're challenges associated with a positive environment for sure.
Wonderful. They're opportunities or challenges masked as opportunities. That's great. Thank you, Gordon, for that. So next question, and it ties nicely into the first, is what are the critical pieces Canada needs to meet these challenges and opportunities? And do we have them? If we don't, how do we establish them?
So any successful life sciences hub in the world is the combination of great science, talented people, and capital properly arranged. And so when you look at those components, we have, as I said a moment ago, an extraordinary research enterprise. We have literally world-beating universities and research institutes across the country that drive very compelling basic research. We also have strong research talent, and we need to spend some attention on how we develop that talent into the commercial ready and commercially focused leadership and scientific development talent that we need. And then the third thing is that availability of capital. We've seen an extraordinary influx of capital in the last 10 months of 2021, following a similar record level in all of 2020. So all of the components are there. The questions that we need to think a lot about as a country, as people who care about the public policy development in this area, and again, from my parochial perspective, the industrial application of that research, is how do we properly arrange those things? So we think a lot about how we create companies, how we create ecosystems in which those companies can thrive, and that's primarily around the wet lab infrastructure and the development of talent. We spend a lot of energy on the talent development front in very specific areas, an area I know that you're expert in, Meg. So you'll appreciate why we care so much about it. But it seems to me that we've got those three components without question. The data are objectively assessed overwhelmingly positive. The question for us as the people driving this industry is how do we actually arrange those things in a way that makes sense and is sustainable for a Canadian industry over time.
Excuse me, very intentionally organized and structured with purpose. Yeah, that's
exactly right. And they are it's a little bit like a Mobius loop, right? They are self-reinforcing. That we can create companies if we have the talent, but the talent can also create the companies, and we need the capital and we need the infrastructure. They all kind of feed each other without question. But absolutely, as you say, they have to be very intentional.
And so in tying with that, what are the major issues facing the life sciences industry itself within Canada?
So look, I think there are a handful of pieces. We can spend a long time talking about science, which is, again, extraordinary in Canada, and we have just a great research enterprise that is generating all sorts of compelling science. Let's talk for a minute about the ecosystems and the talent part of that. When you think about ecosystems, it's a central part of our business. And really that's about creating infrastructure in which emerging companies can evolve. So if you look at our facility in Montreal, 150,000 square feet, that's home to 30 or 40 some odd companies that range in size from repair therapeutics at pushing a couple hundred employees to small 3 and 4 person startup companies. There is something the economist calls this situational alchemy. There's something about the magic of those two organizations being together and learning from each other. We need more of that in Canada. If you look at the 3 main hubs in Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, or other places, Calgary, Edmonton, or Halifax, for example, amongst a whole bunch of other spots, there is an absolute crisis of the availability of wet lab space. We commercially focused wet lab space. So that's an area where we really need to spend some energy. And the good news is that the market will sort out over 4 or 5 years major players. So in Vancouver, Abcellera is building a new facility, Precision Nanosystems building a new facility, Zymeworks is building a new facility. The same thing in Montreal. If you look at a number of the leading players there are building facilities. So over time, those folks will get looked after. The challenge and what the market won't sort out is those emerging companies, the Zymeworks, Repairs, Abcelleras of tomorrow. And that's where we come in. We try and provide that kind of space for those companies to grow and evolve. That's a huge issue that we need to come to terms with, and I would argue very quickly. The second issue, Megan, is about talent. Obviously, I mean, you were kind enough to recognize in your introduction that I spent some time as a venture capitalist. I like to refer to myself as a somewhat reformed venture capitalist. But one of the things that is, I think, axiomatic in venture capital is that you bet on people. 10 times out of 10, you bet on people. And we have all of the elements. What we need to do is help develop that talent in a commercially relevant way. So if I look at the things that we do, for example, our executive institute is focused on building the executive leadership of this industry for the future. Where are we going to find the C-suite talent of all these companies that we're creating and others are creating? Critically important. That program has been wonderfully successful. It is supported, I should hasten to say, by a significant sponsorship from Pfizer Canada, and it focuses on 20 people a year, trying to really build the future C-suite leaders in this space. One of the other things we do is the BioInnovation Scientist Program, which is kind of at the other end of the continuum, thinking about all of the science grads we have in this country. How do we help them understand the commercial application of their science? If you look at a report last year from the Council of Canadian Academies called Degrees of Success, it tells you that 25% of postdocs in this country work in industry. So there's a huge opportunity to help more of those postdocs understand how to apply their expertise commercially. And we know when you look at the billions of dollars raised over the course of the last couple of years, that there are thousands of jobs available for those folks. So we've got to figure out how we match those people. So this program is a very successful program focused on helping master's or doctoral graduates understand how to apply that knowledge in a commercial way. And I should say, I'm just not bragging when I say it's successful. The data tell us 96% of the graduates of that program end up in relevant jobs in industry. So there's two good examples. Biomanufacturing is an area that you understand very well, where there's a huge demand for very specific, thoughtful training. I know that's an area that you're working directly in, that is another one. So I think we've got to figure out how we help that talent become appropriately focused and trained for the industry that we want to build. But we also just need to do it in very focused ways, Megan, because it's not a weekend conference. It's not a pamphlet. It's not even box ticking. It's real granular training, helping people understand how to apply their knowledge. And again, I think it's a huge opportunity for all of us.
That's wonderful. And I certainly echo that too, as you mentioned. So just to reiterate, you've got the Executive Institute that is really focused on C-suite, and then you've got the Biosciences Innovation Program, which is recent graduate postdoctoral fellows. That's wonderful. So I mean, you certainly answered the question of what adMare is doing to help, drive our life science ecosystem forward and to really sustain it and to strengthen it. Is there anything else that you would add in terms of what adMare is involved in, or what your mandate is inclusive of in terms of developing the life sciences ecosystem?
Well, look, we do three things. We build companies, we build ecosystems, and we build talent. So in companies, we do that two ways. We bring research into our own hands and our own labs. We have 80 some odd people, very deeply commercially trained. All of our science leadership team, to a person, has taken a product from the bench to the bedside, literally. So they've a deep understanding of the drug development process. So we bring things into our own hands in our proprietary labs in Vancouver or in Montreal. And we've got a really good track record in doing that. We've got very successful companies in the ecosystem that we're quite proud of. Or we invest directly within companies. I think we're the largest seed investor in life sciences in Canada. When you look at the impact of that work, the companies that we have helped create or invest in have raised over $1.5 billion of real risk capital. They're worth almost $3 billion today, and they employ about 1,000 trainees. So I'm really proud of the work that the team does in that building companies front. The building ecosystems part is really some of that infrastructure that we talked about a moment ago, Megan, looking at how do we provide the physical supports, the physical space that those emerging companies need, but also the feed the intellectual appetite through CPSC, through other organizations and sponsorships to really help folks broaden their level of understanding. We recently had a spectacular webinar with Dr. George Church from Harvard that was a fabulous example of that ecosystem development. And then the third piece is that talent development component. And as you say, that the Executive Institute and the BioInnovations Scientist programs are two good examples of that. We also have a broad co-op program and an on-site postdoc program as well. So really figuring out how we do those three things is critical to the success that our team has helped generate.
Perfect. And like you described before, it's really essential that you're tackling all of them, all three at the same time, because they obviously play into each other, and it's important you can't have one without the other, right? So that's
exactly right. They're all reinforcing each other, but it's also important because we have to be careful sometimes, because sometimes the problem can seem so big, or the challenges seem so big that our efforts are not elastic. We need to be really focused on how we do it. So really focused in the kinds of companies we create, that they have an opportunity to grow and stay in Canada, that we're really interested in building companies that have, I think the technical term is stickiness, that are likely to remain in Canada. So for example, we recently launched a company called Adena Therapeutics in the radiopharm space, where there are very unique Canadian advantages that mean, regardless of how that company grows and where ownership ultimately is, it's likely to remain in Canada. And I think there are wonderful examples of that across the ecosystem. So they are reinforcing, and we have to be very thoughtful and focused about how we do it.
That's great. That transitions very nicely to the next question. And maybe stepping back a moment, why is it important to build homegrown Canadian companies and Canadian talent?
Well, I mean, I think those of us who've lived for the last 24 months sort of feel viscerally the answer to that question, don't we? I mean, look, Canada has historically been an economy of the hewers of wood and drawers, right? We've had this extraordinary bounty of natural resources that we have done the primary exploitation of, and then shipped it off to others around the world to do the real value add. So here we are in life science with this extraordinary primary resource of a research enterprise that we've invested in as a country and built up, and that's the national government, it's the provincial governments, territorial governments, everybody has invested in building that infrastructure. And we've got this extraordinary resource of knowledge and intellectual power that, again, going back to where we started, we know based on objective data ranks well above our relative weight in terms of output. Wouldn't it be extraordinary if we could decide this time that what we're actually going to do is take that natural resource and do the value add development here? And frankly, there's just no damn reason that we cannot. right? We have got all of the components to do it. And it is our purpose and mission as an organization that we figure out how we build this infrastructure in Canada so that we have the benefits of our knowledge and our investments in basic research. It's like those three components we talked about being self-reinforcing. It becomes reinforcing as well, because it goes on to fund and encourage future science and development for human health, amongst other things.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It continues the pipeline, and it's that Mobius strip again.
Exactly.
I'm noticing some common themes coming out, which are very important ones. So thank you for that. And we somewhat talked about this one, but how can Canada create a vibrant and sustainable life sciences ecosystem in the key cluster areas?
So I think we are doing it. We are doing it along some of the areas that we talked about. And the other thing that I would add is that, you know, other people have said that Canada is this great experiment in cultural development, right? We've got the vast majority of our people huddled along the United States border while we have this extraordinary landmass around us. And it doesn't logically follow necessarily that you would organize a country that way. So what Canadians have done over time is figured out how to collaborate effectively with each other, to a certain degree, how to accommodate, but more importantly, how do we collaborate with each other and get the best from each other? So, you know, again, when you think about the things that we need to do for this industry and to build it sustainably, that capacity to collaborate, that capacity to understand how we advance each other's knowledge is an extraordinary, it's not a resource, an extraordinary quality that Canadians have. And any of us who have been in this space for more than 5 minutes know, as you do, Megan, that nothing happens by one person alone. Nothing happens by one research lab alone, even if it's just one lab based on basing its advancement on knowledge that others around the world have generated. So given that basic requirement of how science works, that Canadian capacity to collaborate with each other is a fabulous characteristic of our country.
That's wonderful. Like we like to say, it takes a village, and it sounds like you're saying the same. That's wonderful. Okay, and I think we'll round out maybe the general questions with, what does the future look like for Canadian health sciences? We
are at a absolute tipping point. I kind of hate that phrase, but it's been overused and it's blah. But you know what? It's, in this case, it's absolutely true. We are at an historic moment for everybody in this industry, in this country. We have all of the basic components we need to organize a strong, sustainable, self-reinforcing industry and research enterprise in this country. We have lived through probably the worst catastrophe that any of us expect to live through, and many of us have lived through some pretty odd things over the course of our lifetimes, and pretty horrific things. But this has been the worst. And isn't it extraordinary that out of that crisis comes the final realization of what potential we have in this country, what opportunity exists with what has already been built. And wouldn't it be extraordinary if we could just seize the moment to organize the science, the people, and the capital in an appropriate way so that we can see this industry flourish throughout the future.
Wonderful. Science, people, capital. That's a perfect 3 points to end on in terms of that discussion. And maybe one final question, and that is, what do you see the role being of CSPC within this science policy discussion and how we evolve as a life sciences sector?
I don't think there is any other platform in the country that effectively brings together all of the, and I'll do it again, the three component parts of the basic research, the public policy folks, and the industry folks into one opportunity to listen to each other, to talk with each other, to learn from each other. That's a really powerful platform that actually goes hand in hand with what I was saying a moment ago, about Canadians' capacity to collaborate with each other. So it's not just within specific disciplines, whether it's science, public policy, or business, but through across those disciplines as well, because again, that's critically important. So I just think it's an extraordinary platform that we have been delighted to be a part of for some time, and look forward to continuing to be part of as we all move forward.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gordon. So I think that mostly concludes our interview. Are there any last things that you really want to say or conclude with?
No, let me just say thank you again for doing this, and thank you again for the work that you do in helping other parts of the ecosystem collaborate effectively together, because I think some of the work that you're doing is critically important to the success of our ecosystem as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. And with that being said, on behalf of CSPC, thank you very much for discussing these topics with me today. And thank you to the viewers. If you do have any questions, you can always reach out to CSPC. Their information is available on their website. So if you simply Google CSPC, you can find that information there. So with that, I think that concludes our interview for today. Thank you, Gordon.
Super. Thank you, Megan.
Hello.